On the night of the 18th of June 2026, while 54,000 fans inside the stadium were still processing what they had just witnessed, the broadcast truck made a decision that told you everything you needed to know about what had actually happened on that pitch. Canada had just dismantled Qatar 6-0, one of the most dominant performances in World Cup group stage history, and the cameras should have been replaying every goal, every run, every moment of national celebration. They wouldn't even show the replay, and the reason why is the story nobody in the official broadcast wanted to tell. Gianni Infantino, the man who sold the world this tournament, was somewhere celebrating record attendance figures while a 2-3-year-old midfielder was being carried off a pitch his federation had promised would be the safest, most prepared, most medically advanced World Cup in history. Ismael Koné went down in the 52nd minute, and the stadium went quiet in a way that goals never make a stadium quiet. Not the held breath quiet of a penalty, not the stunned silence of a disallowed goal. The kind of quiet that spreads from the players nearest to him outward, like a wave moving in reverse, until 54,000 people were watching the same thing and saying nothing. The medical staff reached him in seconds, the referee waved the play dead immediately, and somewhere in a production truck, a director made the call to cut away and never come back to that footage. Ismael Koné is 23 years old, a central midfielder born in Guinea who grew up in Montreal and built his career the hard way: youth football in Canada, development years in the lower tiers of North American football, then Watford in the Championship, then Marseille in Ligue 1, where he spent the 2025-26 season finding a level of performance that earned him a starting position for one of the most historic Canadian squads ever assembled. Since his senior international debut, he had collected 24 caps, controlled midfield in Canada's qualifying campaign, and walked into this World Cup as one of the most technically gifted players in John Herdman's setup. He was not a wild card. He was not a squad player called up to make numbers. He was a starter, a creator, a 2-3-year-old at the peak of his development curve, playing on the biggest stage the sport has to offer, in front of his home country's fans. And then the 52nd minute arrived. The stakes here are not abstract. Canada had never won a World Cup group stage match before this tournament. The nation had been waiting decades for a moment like this, and Kone was supposed to be part of the full story, not just the opening chapter. While the scoreline climbed to 6-0 and Jonathan Davis and Sile Larin were being celebrated across every platform, the man who helped build the platform those goals were scored on was in a medical room, and the broadcasts had already moved on. Infantino had spent 2 years telling anyone with a microphone that the 4-8-team format existed to grow the game, to give nations like Canada and Qatar their moment, and Canada got their moment, but nobody asked what the cost of that moment looks like when the cameras cut away. What nobody at the Federation expected was how fast the clip spread anyway. You cannot suppress a moment like that in 2026. Every phone in that stadium captured something, and within 90 minutes of the final whistle, the footage was circulating on X, on Reddit, on WhatsApp groups from Toronto to Vancouver. And the question being asked everywhere was the same: why did the broadcast cut away, and why did they never come back? That changed when the leak came out. And it was not a leak from a journalist, it was simply reality. The injury was severe enough that showing it repeatedly in slow motion, the way every other significant moment in a World Cup broadcast gets treated, would have crossed a line that even the most ratings-driven director was not willing to cross. The broadcast team made the right call in the room. What the broadcast team could not control was what that decision communicated: that this was not a minor knock, not a cramp, not a precautionary substitution. This was the kind of injury that changes conversations. And this is where it gets worse, because by the time the official injury update came through, the medical language was careful enough to be almost meaningless, which in football communications is its own form of admission. Infantino's FIFA released a statement about the match that ran 4 paragraphs on the historical significance of Canada's victory and addressed the Kone situation in a single dependent clause. Pull back from the emotion for a moment, because this is not an isolated incident, and the pattern deserves the attention it rarely gets. In the 2022 World Cup in Qatar, the tournament Infantino famously declared made him feel Arabic, African, gay, disabled, and a migrant worker in the same press conference Neymar Jr. left Brazil's opening group match against Serbia in the 79th minute after his ankle swelled visibly during the game. He returned 3 matches later, but the weeks in between were defined by medical bulletins that contradicted each other, a Brazilian press corps that received conflicting information, and a federation that struggled to manage the narrative around its most important player. Before that, at Euro 2020, Christian Eriksen's cardiac arrest on the pitch during Denmark versus Finland exposed every gap in how live sport deals with medical emergencies in real time. UEFA subsequently revised its broadcast protocols, but implementation across competitions has been inconsistent ever since. And FIFA under Infantino has never issued a unified broadcast standard for injury coverage across World Cup productions. At the 2018 World Cup in Russia, Mohamed Salah left Egypt's opening match against Uruguay after a shoulder injury sustained in the Champions League final weeks earlier, a decision Egypt's federation had communicated poorly to the public, leaving millions of fans watching their captain play visibly compromised with no clear understanding of the risk involved. In club football, the handling of Diogo Jota's leg fracture at Liverpool in 2023, Jean-Claire Todibo's knee injury at Nice, and Reece James's serial hamstring issues at Chelsea all point to the same structural failure. Football institutions, whether clubs, federations, or governing bodies, are consistently better at protecting information than protecting players, and the two are not always the same thing. None of the official statements from these cases address the fact that the players themselves, in most instances, received their prognosis through intermediaries while the public narrative was still being shaped around them. Infantino attended press conferences for all of these tournaments and spoke at length about player welfare in every one of them. Here is what the Kone situation connects to, beyond the individual injury, beyond the broadcast decision, beyond the social media reaction. World Cup football in 2026 is operating under a 4-8 team format that FIFA pushed through, that Infantino personally championed, lobbied for, and secured the votes to implement over the objections of coaches, medical professionals, and players' associations who all made the same point. More teams means more matches means more accumulated fatigue across a longer season, and more accumulated fatigue means that a 2-3-year-old midfielder arriving at a World Cup in June has already played through 10 months of competitive football at the highest level. Kone played the full League One season with Marseille, he played Europa League football, he played CONCACAF qualifiers. He arrived at this World Cup carrying the load of a full professional season, the way every player at this tournament arrived carrying the load of a full professional season, and the 4-8 team format does not account for that load it adds to it. FIFA Pro, the Global Players Union, submitted a formal report to FIFA in 2024, documenting that elite players were already exceeding safe annual match thresholds before any World Cup football was factored in. Infantino's response, delivered at a press conference in Zurich, was to describe the report as one perspective among many, and note that player welfare remained a top priority for this organization. The result is a tournament where the injury rate tells a story that the official communications do not. Broadcasters cut away from replays. Federations release careful statements. FIFA publishes its match statistics. And a 2-3-year-old midfielder who worked his entire career to reach this stage is somewhere in a medical facility, and the cameras have already moved on to the next goal. This is like building a Formula One circuit with no runoff zones and then expressing surprise when the crashes are serious. The sport knows the load is unsustainable. The sport has known it for years. The Players' Union has submitted reports. The coaches have spoken at press conferences. The doctors have published the data. Infantino has sat in rooms where all of that evidence was presented, and the 4-8 team format survived every single conversation. Because the format was never primarily about player welfare, it was about the broadcast rights deal that a 1-0-4 match tournament commands versus the deal a 6-4 match tournament commands. And that calculation was completed long before any medical professional was invited into the room. What makes the Kone moment genuinely unsettling is not the injury itself, because injuries happen in football, they have always happened in football, and no format eliminates that reality. What makes it unsettling is the institutional response. A broadcast cut, a careful statement, a news cycle that moved within hours to the 6-0 scoreline, to Jonathan Davis's goal tally, to Canada's group stage qualification, and left the injury as a footnote. The man who went down in the 52nd minute became context for a result rather than the subject of the conversation the moment demanded. Infantino will stand at the final in July, lift the trophy alongside whichever nation wins it, and deliver a speech about the beauty of football and the power of this sport to unite the world. And nowhere in that speech will he mention the players who did not make it to the final stages, because the schedule that produced his record revenues also produced the injuries that ended their tournaments early. The system is not broken in a way that is visible from the outside. It is broken in the way that a dressing room with a fractured culture looks fine from the stands. Everything appears to be functioning. The results are coming, the spectacle is delivered, and the problems are managed quietly, until they are not quiet anymore, and by then the tournament has moved on and the next match is 3 days away. So when you watch the next match and the camera cuts away from something before you can fully understand what you just saw, ask yourself whose interest that decision is protecting: the player on the ground or the product being sold by the man holding the trophy at the end. A like on this video helps more than you think.